So Shawn, it's great to meet you. Great to meet you. I first heard about you maybe maybe a year ago, maybe not quite a year ago. And how I came across you was I saw someone post that they tagged you and they said this is the doctor who uh gets people better when nobody else is. And when I saw that, those are the kind of things that intrigue me. I like to collaborate. I like to follow and meet with people that are like that, driven for excellent results, and doing things that are not the standard norm. Um, especially in conventional care. Okay, especially in conventional care, but even past beyond that, functional medicine, naturopathic medicine. Um, I think that there are great practitioners out there doing their best. I do think there's a lot of them that are kind of just following a status quo pattern and, you know, treating the treating the body without treating the mind. And I've just seen a couple of things of yours and watched a couple of videos of yours, and I see that you're much different. You're much more in depth, and you're much more focused. So I wanted to reach out to you and just have you a guest on my podcast. And I know you're not the typical practitioner. You're not the typical person who,
No.
um, typical health expert, that you have a unique level of skills that uncover patterns and difficult client cases, um, excelling at interpreting tests, excelling at finding core things that maybe other doctors miss, that really set you apart for getting results in all areas, from biochemistry, genetics, epigenetics, and so forth. And this makes you in high demand. And I'm pleased to have you here with me today. It's a real honor, and I'd like to just kind of establish a good meeting here, and share with some people, uh, that maybe are frustrated, that maybe have tried everything, that there still is stones to be unturned when we have driven professionals like yourself that go above and beyond to find uh, hidden mechanisms of what could cause people to, be struggling with their health. So, Shawn, thank you for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Gabe. And I've been following your work as well. And the idea of the spirituality and the traumas have come into a big play with a lot of my complex cases. And specifically with the mind and spirit and quantum physics is a huge avenue that's generalized. It's just getting to be explored.
Right. Um, if you don't mind, let me ask you, and I would like to get into that a little bit more. What got you started on all this? What got you started on this journey?
Basically, what got me started on this journey was the fact what is I was an extreme athlete being a bodybuilder, and we push our bodies to both the mind and physical level. We use a lot of stimulants. We use a lot of anabolic steroids. I'm not a lot of anabolic steroids, but people chose to use what they ever chose to use, and I used the lower end of the totem pole. People were doing 2,000 milligrams a week. I was doing like two or 300. And because my body was so responsive, you know, I didn't need a lot. And I used them for dieting down on anyway. I didn't use them to get big. I used them to maintain, like Arnold used to do. Arnold used
Right.
to enjoy his off season, stay drug free, then use them dieting down. And actually, the one last contest I did, I was actually year clean. So that was shelved, but everybody was like, oh, it was because of that. I'm like, no, that's not true. What was really true is it was goes back to the circadian pattern. What happened is I read an article by a professional bodybuilder. He used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, eat his meal, go back to bed, and go train. So the disturbance of the circadian pattern was the catalyst for what was going on. And I'd get up in nighttime. I would have a protein. I would have an oatmeal with a scoop, 2 scoops of whey protein, eat it, and go back to bed. Well, now we know that the disturbance of the circadian pattern opens up the door to immunological dysfunctions and neurological dysfunctions, and your liver is not detoxifying right, so forth. And I lived in houses with mold all the time as a child. I used to go down in the basement, go work out, trudge through water, you know, onto wooden planks, that were submerged with carpet, for God. And you could see the walls growing on, could see the mold growing on the wall. But we never thought nothing of it, right? So that was probably all housed in me for God knows how many years. And then I moved into a house that had mold in it itself that I found out 25 years later when I asked at my mom, I'm like, I've been chasing this mercury toxicity, all this other heavy stuff. You know, it was basically overtraining, and they tried to label it as stress, but there was no stress in my life. So, because when you're 235 pounds and you drop down to 165 pounds, losing 100 pounds of lean muscle tissue in 9 months, I would have been dead if I wasn't as big as I was. So my body was literally feeding off itself, and that's what the mold was doing. There was actually a trigger because the day after the contest, my immune system was down. I had sushi because we used to go out and have sushi after contests, and we'd be there for a good long while. And I put on 25 pounds of water weight in about 6 hours from all the sodium.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it was like even taking the precautions such as the ginger root and the digestive enzymes and everything I was doing, it wasn't enough. My immune system was shot. So a couple of days later, it's like I started to have gas problems. I started to, have all kinds of gastrointestinal problems. And then it just snowballed. And then I moved into a house with mold in it. And then one day my life changed. That was the day that I woke up with total amnesia, didn't know who I was, where I was, stuttering. It was the most scariest day of my life. And it came out of no man's land, you know? And to live like to wake up like that, never don't know who you are, where you were, totally confused and stuttering was scary. And then from that day on, my health just snowballed. And when it snowballed, you went to this doctor and that doctor, you're like a ping pong ball going back and forth. And then they all end up, oh, this is all in your head. And they meet a really good doctor. And the first thing I told them said, find out what is deficient and put it back in. But they didn't have the tools back then. And it was a
Say
simple,
that again. Find out what.
my whole idea was find out when nutritional deficiencies I had
Oh, okay.
and put them back in. Because without the nutrients, I knew that your body didn't work right. And even though I was eating 5,000 calories or 4,000 calories, my weight was still going down. So I had malabsorption. And that set off the adrenal cascade. That set off the hypothalamus, the HPT axis dysfunction, the adrenals. I went into, they said, I don't even know how you walk around. My cortisol levels came back 2.3, which was on serum, which is basically almost borderline Addison's. And
Right.
then you had the drop in cortisol, then you had the rise in adrenaline. I can't tell you how many phones I broke because of the fact of you go from 0 to 60 in a split second, because you just got agitated. And then, as we know, as I started to learn, it's like, then you got the adrenaline, then you've got the glutamate on top of it. And then you become this paranoid person walking into a doctor's office. And then I finally met this amazing healer. She placed my hands on me and she goes, you're going to be one of the greatest healers in a long time. Like, listen, lady, I don't know what you're smoking or what you've been drinking. I can't even barely wipe my backside. Alone, my mom has to drive me everywhere. And it was that day forth that I kind of felt this energetic shift where it was like, now let me take the bull by the horn and do what we have to do. And this is where it led me into starting to research. This where it led me into going into the different forms. Okay. Cure Zone was big back then. It was huge. And they all focused on the gallbladder. They all focused on the gut microbiome. But the thing was, is they were people thought they were charlatans because they were way ahead of their times.
Right.
And I met somebody and she goes, Shawn, she goes, you have the characteristic of an autistic child. I said, what? And I started thinking about what she was saying, and I was going back to as I was growing up. It made sense because as growing up, I had a learning disability, but I was highly functioning. So they actually put me in what was called child development at the time because I had a learning disability. I was dyslexic, and but mathematically, you know, back then we were considered the word retards was the common terminology that we had. And the people that I was hanging around, the people that were in the classes were, they had IQs of like 50 or below, where my IQ was actually tested at 140, which is basically borderline Mensa genius.
Right.
And I started to develop the autistic characteristics of hearing sensitivity, flapping the hands. I didn't know anything about it back then. My characteristics also were um, agoraphobia,
And
fear of crowds.
this was all when you were real young then?
This was all when I was really young. I used to make gurgling sounds, shake my head, sit on top of my, I didn't, it was all common to me. I didn't know no difference. And we didn't know what autism was back then. We were
Right.
just considered shy.
Right.
Okay. Shy. Oh, you're just shy. Well, now we know that's a form of autism, believe it or not. And it's a form of agoraphobia, which is a form of fear of crowds, because I was always isolating myself. And I always was, quote, a loner. But the friends I had were not, they weren't quantity, they were quality. And we were the oddballs, you know, we were the outcast. But the most amazing thing is I was a star athlete. That's why I didn't fall into the typical norm of autism, because autism kids are usually clumsy.
Hmm.
And that's what made it so hard to figure out because everything I had done sports wise, I've gone to the highest level. Same way now with medical. I've gone to the highest level. I sit with the highest highest professionals on endocrinology, immunology, neurology. And I've been trained by the best who've mentored me. And what I've done is I've taken, because of my Asperger's, it allows me to see that holographic viewpoint to allow to access data coming in at fast rates and be able to put it in specific files and connect the dots. Okay. It's kind of like I tell people, it's kind of like you have this web, that's why I'm called the Matrix, Matrix Alpha Mormis. It's being able to see things from a different perspective, but then be able to connect the dots using analytical and algorithmic mechanisms, but they're also scientifically validated. And that's what sets me apart from everybody else is, or when I started doing this, I had to come up against the medical society because I had to get over this hatred of medical doctors that I'm better than them. So what I found out you're never going to go up against the system. They're going to crush you. So what
Right.
I did is I thought about, I'm like, listen, I'm not getting nowhere, and they're going to just keep pushing me down, saying, you're not a medical doctor, you're not a medical doctor, you have no degree. How can we take you? So what I did is I thought a different philosophy. I'm like, okay, how about we change the mindset within the system? If you can change mindset within the system, what you slowly do is you slowly start to create a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift eventually goes into a snowball effect to where one person gets it, then they'll tell another person, and then you're slowly starting to change the system that you were such hatred about. And we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see the medical doctors more accepting of people with non-medical degrees. And in in this day and age, we have to put our egos aside and do what is humbling because yes, I was smarter than the doctors and I let them know that. But now it's like you have to give them the rice bowl. You have to
Yep.
put them up on a pedestal. You have to respect them, and then they'll respect you. Because you can't say, "Oh, you're wrong." Because I was with a really good doctor, and my thyroid was all out because Armor changed their formula, and then I had to go through 9 different types of thyroid medicines to find the right one, which was Irfa, because I couldn't break it down because of my digestive tract. And then what that did was, is when patients would come into the doctors, which we had a collaborative effort on, I went into excitatory mode. Oh, and I said, "Doc, you're wrong. That was not a good thing to say." Even though I was right,
Right.
this came out the wrong way. And that was because of my thyroid being off. And when I'm talking about my thyroid being off, I'm talking about a TSH of 15 with a free T3 of 1.7, which is
Mm.
extremely low, clinical hypothyroid. And the amazing thing was, is I actually won the only case in Pennsylvania's history for workmen for disability based upon hypothyroidism
Mm.
in a court system. I was rewarded.
Wow.
And that was an amazing feat because there was no way. My lawyer came back to me. I don't know how we did it, but I said, what? He said, yeah, you got rewarded your disability. I'm like, and the hardest time was, you know, the judge saw me, I could barely walk and function at 165 pounds. And 6 months later, I come back 210 pounds. And it was also during the Mark McGuire situation because
Oh.
I was on testosterone replacement. I was being treated for testosterone. So it was kind of like I had a lot of things going against me, but I actually came out on top. I think it was the only court case in Pennsylvania's history that got won on clinical hypothyroidism.
Hmm. That's really something. So that's what got you the ball rolling and going in this direction and looking at all the other, hidden pieces. So when you were first um having these when you were first starting to have these breakdowns, starting to have the mold affect you, and particularly leading up to you waking up with amnesia, and then going to what kind of doctors was it that you were seeing? I imagine that you started out with conventional and you started going to other doctors after that. But what was that journey like?
It was very frustrating because you basically felt like a ping pong ball. And back then, 20 years ago, you do a blood test, you had to be in limbo for 6 to 8 weeks before because you couldn't get the doctors wouldn't give you the testing results until you came back for the appointment.
Mm,
So if your thyroid was off, you had to suffer for 6 to 8 weeks until you came back. Then if you missed your appointment, then it was another 12 weeks you had to wait. And sometimes you had to wait 12 weeks to get in to see the doctor. So there was a lot of lag time in between. And it's like your whole life became waiting for the testing results to come back or waiting to see the doctor. And it was just like your body was stuck in like a suspended animation because it's like you had nothing else to do other than because you couldn't work, you couldn't think straight. So I ended up spending most of my time on the computer. And back then we had dial up. So you had to sit and wait for the screen to load
yeah.
versus where you touch a button and it's right there today, you know? So it was very frustrating. It was very heart-wrenching because you knew something was wrong, but you couldn't do anything about it until you saw the testing results. Or the doctors would come back with the testing results. They'll say, "You're normal, nothing wrong." Because back then they didn't know about the gray areas.
Right.
Still today, you have the black and white. And I see that with a lot of my clients is you have to fall off the cliff before they throw you the rope, is the way I explain it. And they're going to be sitting there waiting for you until you start to slip. But sometimes it's too late and they don't catch you and you fall. And that's the way I explain it to my clients.
Right, and I think what you're getting at with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the way their lab tests work is they don't test for necessarily like a functional range. It's more of a dysfunctional range. So you're by the time you could be still in what's called a functional range, but you could be millimeters out of the dysfunction, and they still say it's okay until you go into the dysfunction range, and for that's when you're officially off the cliff. You fell off, right?
Correct. And, since I've been in this game for a very long time, the ranges have changed. The ranges are changed because the general population, the norm is becoming the sick.
Right.
So sick is becoming the norm. Because when we first started on thyroid, it used to be 2.4 was the lower range on the free T4. Now it's 2.0.
They're changing on all kinds of things, including blood pressure, even body temperature. So all kinds of things now are
I've seen,
changing in acceptable ranges because the population itself is shifting and changing, right?
I've even seen one total cholesterol level of less than 180 was considered hyperlipidemic,
Hmm.
which scares the living Jesus out of me. And there was actually one time that there was a bill to put statins in our water as a protective mechanism.
I remember hearing about that,
It was
and
actually in
the
Congress.
the literature is very clear on what statins do. I'm sure you probably recognize every diabetic is on statins, and it's been shown to completely disrupt um, all the mechanisms of the body have to do with hormones, the liver, which is a diabetes problem, diabetes type 1, but also the the tremendous correlation between brain dysfunction,
Mhm.
Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that with statins. So,
Well, the interesting thing about that is my body, because of the mold toxicity, because of the chemical, because of the toxins is produced, it produced statins. So my body was actually had the biochemistry of not only a person who's overdosing on statins, but also chemotherapy. Because
wow.
one of the mechanisms I had was mycophenolic acid. Well, they use mycophenolate for guess what? Chemotherapy. And when I sent my results to a doctor friend of mine who's a ND, Dr. Paul Anderson, the first question out of his mouth is where are you on, how much phenolic acid are you, how many phenolate are you on? I said, I'm not on any because I had the highest recording in Great Plains history. When the range should have been less than 50, I was at 10,500. And that was
Man,
from penicillium aspergillus.
mold.
Yes, and what happened is the penicillium aspergillus actually secretes a statin to protect itself.
Mm.
So my total cholesterol level has been documented. When I first got sick, my total cholesterol was 89. They told me that congratulations, you have the best cholesterol I ever seen from a medical doctor.
Yeah.
Now I know that that was from the statins that was produced.
So was it doctors that were able to and the impression I'm getting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but much like my own journey, it wasn't really doctors that helped me get my health back on track. And mine wasn't as severe as yours, waking up with severe amnesia, and then having, chemotherapy type biochemistry going on. Mine was just severe PTSD from childhood trauma and probably proliferated as a United States Marine. So um, mine was just uh, intense um, flashbacks, tightness, tension in my body all the time, uh, panic attacks, adrenaline through the roof, and I was really drawn to high stakes things. Like once I got the Marine Corps, I immediately became a paramedic in the back of an ambulance and work in emergency rooms. Um, high adrenaline, high stress kind of things is what I was drawn to, but I couldn't turn it off. So I ended up smoking a lot of marijuana to kind of cool myself off
Hmm.
in the the evening time so I could even get to sleep. And I started looking for ways to get peace. I wanted some kind of peace in my mind, and I wanted my mind to start working for me. And I started studying everything I could. I became a chiropractor, started working with energy medicine, and became a best practitioner, and worked with all these different modalities from emotional freedom technique to body code, emotional code, to all these different things to try to get my mind to try to get that calm down. And I could tell it was letting off the gas pedal, but the gas pedal was still pushed down way too far, way too far. And it wasn't until I started learning about deeper levels of going back and changing childhood memories, the perception of those, where it just completely changed my life and my capabilities. So what I'm getting at here is I had to keep searching until I found the answer to resolve it on resolve it in my own life. And then I started translating that to my own clients. Was it kind of the same path for you to where you have this certain biochemistry of almost like you're on statins, chemotherapy, doctors are looking at it, they're confused. Maybe they're running more functional tests and they're seeing things that are just don't make sense to them. And meanwhile, with your ability to see things in a different level, seeing things, you know, different way of processing information, more detailed. Were you the one that ultimately became your best healer
Yeah,
in all this?
I was my own health advocate is the best thing. I had to become, quote, my own doctor. And from that information, it's like I had to learn biochemistry because I was paradoxical to everything. So that's why I had to learn biochemistry, genetic expressions, trauma, different modalities, herbology. I mean, I'm so highly trained right now in peptides and plant medicine and just a plethora of stuff. But the thing is what separates what I know is knowing the sequence and knowing, when you take this peptide, you got to worry about these pathways because their doctors are just willy-nilly throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And as a result, they're unintentionally doing more harm and not realizing it. Because I had a person just the other day on peptides, and I'm like, listen, you're on the wrong sequence. You need to do thymosin alpha 1 first, then then BCP, then you got to get this pathway taken care of first. And this is what's not being taught in even functional medicine is the sequence. And the sequence is not based upon algorithmic mechanisms. It's on bioindividuality. It's on gene expressions because there's not one person that has even identical twins can express differently.
Right,
They can have the same set of genes, but they can totally express completely 100% differently.
right,
And everybody comes in and looks like the same fish in a fishbowl. It's not the same, you know. And when you throw the genetics involved in there, and I keep telling people, it's like even the acupuncturists are coming back and saying things aren't working like they used to. And I tell them, I said, the playing field's changed. If you don't change with the times, you're not going to be able to keep up with them. And even with, functional medicine is, or, people that have made their mark in specific modalities or expertise that have been around for 25 years, they're resistant to change. And that's why a lot of them are starting to fail. The people that are going to adapt are going to be the ones to survive. Yes, they made their mark. Yes, they've done incredible. But what works, because since COVID hit, what used to work, you might as well just throw everything you learned out the window because that's what I'm seeing. You know, I'm seeing everything that you once learned had to get unlearned because of what this thing's doing. Because this organism is not of this earth. It is a hybrid of a parasite, virus, and God knows what else. But it's just not. And when you have that, it's actually acting like the new line because you think you get rid of it. Instead, it goes into its dormant state. And then it starts eating away at your immune system. And then whatever you had pre-existing, Pandora's box is opened up. I just had a case today. We went through, we did different lab testing. I said, yours looks like mold. She goes, funny you said that. She goes, I had mold under control, but as soon as I got COVID again, my whole, her Pandora box opened right back up again because her immune system was keeping it in check. But because the immune system went out, the animal got out of the cage again. And now she's back to square one. And that's what we're seeing with these new cases coming in. What used to work is no longer working, and we have to find new ways to deal
And
with
was that shift starting to change maybe even before COVID and the COVID just kind of accelerated it?
it. I started to notice because of being on the forums a lot of more hypothyroidism. I started to notice a lot of more like gut issues starting to arise. And, I think it has to do with the environmental exposures slowly starting to wear us down, the glyphosates,
Right.
the um, the xenoestrogens. I have 7-year-olds when I have parents, I'm said, is your daughter, does your daughter have pubic hair? She goes, oh my God, she's 7 years old. I said, well, it's probably coming from the shampoos that you're using that you didn't know about, that you're rubbing on their skin or coming from sunscreen. But you shouldn't, 7 years old,
Right.
having pubic hair, you know, for a girl, that's unheard of. And when you bring it to their attention, they're like, yeah, we weren't using natural stuff. I said, well, because of your
And
genes.
those xenoestrogens are everywhere from fast food wrappers to receipt papers to you know the atrazine, the glyphosate you mentioned are both, I'm pretty sure atrazine, but definitely glyphosate are water soluble, which makes them really, really uh, dangerous because they can just go anywhere. Usually, and glyphosate is it's a antibiotic more than anything else,
Correct.
and it just wreaks havoc on the biome and I've read some things. I don't know how accurate they are, but it's spooky because they're water soluble, that they're now basically in the climate. They're in the rain, they're everywhere else. So it's basically able to evaporate and then come back down as part of the ecosystem. So we're all exposed, without a doubt. We're all exposed um as clean as we try to be. I think that essentially we have to make detoxing a big part of our life today. And in my personal clinical experience, the thing I want to show people is to have the right mindset, to have the subconscious mind program for life preserving mindset first, what I coin self-mutilation programs.
Mhm.
These can make a person much more resilient. There's no when you look at some of the times where you'd see an 80-year-old man who smoked cigarettes his whole life and he's 80 years old and he's still healthy and strong and he smoked cigarettes his whole life. And then you see somebody who's 40 who's had lung cancer and they've never had a cigarette in their life. Those are the kind of things that I think the mindset is crucially important in that. What's going on inside of them? You mentioned trauma. And I'm curious to hear because I know that you're fully aware of that. You're more equipped than the average doctor. Many people, many functional medicine doctors, and that's the ones I want to those are the ones I really want to target because I have a background in functional medicine as well. And I've done certain things for years, lab testing, parasite cleanses, detoxifying, looking at heavy metals, trying to get people eating organic and things like that. And I would do things to kind of help clear their emotions. But ultimately, I found that there was a big recurring pattern of maybe 75%, maybe even more. People would do good for a while, they would improve and they would have significantly different, they'd look better, they'd function better, and then a year, 2 years later, they would be back ill again, or something else would be going on. New symptoms arrived, and it's like, well, we're changing protocols, we're doing this and that, and ultimately, what I noticed was that once I got their mindset right, once that I helped them change how they believe about themselves and how they believe about the world around them, much more long term, way better outcomes that were permanent. So, Shawn, if you could touch a little bit on what your findings are, what you've experienced, and kind of what your interpretation is of trauma that you're witnessing in your own expertise.
Well, first of all, NLP certified level one, two, and three, and I'm actually part of the Guild of the Hypnotists. So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. So
Ah,
I'm very,
me as well on all that. So,
but I don't utilize it. But I use the training of the NLP because, NLP taught to psychiatrists will increase their output by 50, 60%. Because it's the same techniques that they taught in the FBI on interrogation, and they'll teach you how to listen. Um, but what we're seeing here is being trained as a hypnotherapist. I've actually encountered very unique cases. And one of the cases that I just came across with is they've tried everything, everything's failing. And my little intuition said, I'm like, this is more of a spiritual thing, or this is more of a trauma to where your body's breaking down into different separations or ego states. And each of those ego states could have a different chemistry based upon the trauma that it experienced.
right.
And this is why it becomes tricky because one of the cases I worked on with hypnotherapists was there were 8 different ego states, and each state had its own different biochemistry. One was hypertensive, one was diabetic, one had hypothyroidism, and they would cycle through based upon specific traumas they were having. So what we had to do was is we did what you know as parts therapy.
Mhm.
You had to go in, separate them, and then bring them back together. And that had to use a combination of NLP, hypnotherapy, and then the type of modality that they utilize with the REM
EMDR.
EMDR, because you had to
Right.
separate them, learn them, and then bring them back together. And when that happened, this person that was going to this doctor and taking insulin and have a paradoxical stopped. And I just had a case of that. I suspect because I'm like, listen, I'm like, this does not fall into the realm of the norm. Okay. Because the person is actually one biochemistry, but expressing completely opposite. And like they look insulin resistance 100%. But on the flip side, their biochemistry is that of insulin sensitivity. And I'm like, this does not make sense. So I actually sent them out to a practitioner because I contacted them. And what she does is she goes through the DNA and looks at their past, through their traumas. And I don't know, it gets into the quantum realm, but I've had cases 17, 18 years old with constipation, and they linked it back to one episode. It takes one trauma to set you off. And until you find that specific trauma, that is going to keep replicating in your amygdala in your head. And oftentimes it's usually something simple, like maybe dad didn't come to the game or something.
Right.
And as a child, that's traumatic,
Sure.
but you don't recognize it at the conscious level, but your subconscious mind takes it to the next levels, like it's a death or something.
Right.
So
You're talking exactly my language. This is and rather than parts, I usually do similar, and I'll do it all in one session of a batch release, and where I'm taking all the past versions of them that have ever felt that way,
mhm.
and and getting to what's called the initial sensitizing event, where the very first seed planting of that, and I'm about 100 I'm about one third of the way through on my next book. where I talk about um, big T and little t trauma in more detail. And big T trauma is where our life feels threatened when we're little, when we're young. Little t trauma is where we're supposed to have good things happen and they didn't. There's a biological necessity when we're born for all practical reasons, for all practical purposes, when we're conceived. There's where it's like a blank slate with no memory, but we still have biological necessities to be comforted, to be our authentic self, to speak from our heart. And that's that spiritual connection, right?
Mhm.
And when those needs aren't met, they only grow stronger and more intense over the years. So you're speaking my language when you're talking about this. It just gets me excited because these are the oftentimes the missing link, and it's very refreshing to hear an expert talk about that. It could be one little thing like that that sets it all off. And so so do you see? Let me ask you this: do you see trauma being a huge player in our society today, like more so as we were talking about things changing even before COVID? And what used to work didn't work. Are you noticing more and more trauma um, impacting, the
Well,
outcomes of clients?
if you look from the clinical standpoint, on a diagnosis standpoint, because of COVID, it's considered an epigenetic event. We all have PTSD clinically,
Right.
and that the degree of PTSD, also think about if 50 to 60% of the buildings in America had or have had water damage, that's also going to be a major factor too. And also, if we're in a relationship with a narcissist and confined, I'm starting to see that a lot more too in women because of the trauma of the being stuck in a relationship and they can't get out because they were in, lockdown, so to speak. So that could definitely be traumatic. And then you have, that with pregnancy being, locked down. So you're going to have kids that are going to be more traumatic experience. And then those kids are being born in houses of mold, which is only going to amplify the autism even more. So to answer your question, absolutely, because I I'm not going to drag a person 12, 14 weeks and saying, listen, this isn't, just take their money. I'm going to put my foot down and say, listen, after a certain amount of time, this ain't working. We got to shift gears. And sometimes they may work in conjunction, or sometimes they may have to clear the pathways, because I just had one case that when we tried everything and I sent her to a person who did polyvagal. And once they did the polyvagal, she didn't realize how important the vagus nerve was. And not only was she able to, I mean, the email is beautiful. Um, Not only did she release the negative energy from her past relationship, but when she released that negative energy, the vibrational energy of the universe brought her old flame back in 2 weeks later. And then as a result, they're now going to be getting married. They rekindled it. So when you're in a negative environment, it's not just being negative within you, but also what is the persona around you.
For sure.
And we know that likes attract. And as long as your mindset is clear, and the number one thing that even as autistic, we want to feel safe.
Right.
Safety is the love, not love, yes, but you want to feel safe.
Right.
Safety takes top priority because if you don't feel safe, you're going to be locked in that dorsal vagal state. And that
Right.
dorsal vagal state is not where you want to be. You want to be in the ventral state, to where, social, and that's what they did when they put us in lockdown. They put us in dorsal vagal state, which is that fight or flight mode, nonstop.
Oh, for certain. I mean, that's about everything they do with the bombardment of the media, the messages, everything possible. And just like things have changed, also the amount of TV shows have changed. Even though this is kind of going off the subject, that still talks about whether is it stimulating us in the right way or the wrong way. And there's no more calm, good family shows anymore. It's always something threatening, and the TV definitely programs the subconscious mind, and
Absolutely.
and just the amount of tension and uh, the fear. You're exactly right. I've seen love mess people up. The word love mess people up many times. So, because it's whatever it's accepted first, and it could be distance and criticism, but they associate that word with it. So,
Yeah, and back when I was growing up, it was like, look what was going at the YMCA. Look what the football team's doing. Now it's like, look who's getting shot. You know, look what politics is doing. You know, and it's word is social programming, and we're becoming a society of dopamine freaks because we're just wanting more and more, faster, faster, stronger, stronger, quicker, quicker.
harder
We're back
hitting, harder
hard
hitting.
hitting.
Yeah,
The running joke is like, listen, you're sitting there screaming at the microwave, go faster and faster. I won't, get done, get done. I said, well, guess what? We had to put our toast in the toaster and it took 20 minutes to toast. Now it's like you can throw it in the microwave and be done, but the quality's not the same.
no, nowhere near.
Nowhere near the same. I'm like, I'll take a toast. I'll put toaster and make that pizza, gluten-free pizza with, like mom used to make, throw in your toaster and be done in 20, 25 minutes, but it'll be crisp, you know? Now people throw it in the microwave, it's all soggy and everything. So even as you get faster, the quality is declining. And
Right,
that's something that I see too is I don't think people take care. Look at the houses. Houses used to take a long time to build. Now they go up in no time and they don't last that long, you know.
right,
Same
right.
way with cars, you know. Somebody somebody made a good analogy. I didn't think about it. It's like, hey, think about restoration of a Tesla versus a restoration of like a 1969 Camaro.
Wow.
You think about it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Are you going to restore a Tesla? Hell no. You're going to restore a Camaro? Yes, you will. So it all goes back to quality of product.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of functional medicine doctors. They'll they have these big monster practices, which is fine, but they have to see us. I call them mill houses. They have
Tell
revolving
me,
door.
tell me it. I tell you what, because one of my, and I can tell you're in the same boat, not to interrupt you, Shawn, but I can tell you're on the same boat. You're on the same mission to change this because in my opinion, and I'd like to hear your feedback, functional medicine in some ways is starting to get a bad reputation because it's because we're many times almost taking an allopathic approach, but doing so with vitamins and supplements and everything else, and not looking at these other issues like trauma and complex complex detoxing pathways, things like that. And a majority of my clients, and I'm sure yours the same, have been seeing functional medicine doctors and have a briefcase of supplements and just they're feeling like crap. So this Millhouse, tell me a little bit about that and what you're observing.
When it comes to the mill house, they have to see so many people on a certain day, and then that way they lose quality. One of the doctors that I went to, very prominent, very good at what she does, but at 10 minutes before 10 minutes before her assistant comes knocking on the door. 10 minutes, you got 10 minutes, and you could not even be halfway through your appointment, what you got to get out. But it's like, okay, write it up, you're done, you know. See, my practice is based upon not the clock. And the reason I do that is I see it, I can't see, you know, if I had the ability, I'd work probably 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and it wouldn't bother me, tell you the truth. I would love it, tell you the truth. Because just get engorged with my work. But the thing is due to the complexity of the cases, it's like I can't see no more than like 4 people, 5 people a day, because it's like the thought process that goes into it, where, another practitioner, like one of my friends in Canada, a very prestigious naturopath, he makes $15,000 a day. Okay, gross. But the operations to run that is astronomical because of the buildings, that the staff you have to pay, and at the end of the day, he's not really walking out that much,
Right.
but he's providing a decent service. Okay, he's a little more attentive than the average person, but still, it's like, or you got a doctor who does have a middle house, which I'm not going to mention names, but you have 15 people that are getting IVs on a rotation basis. And I told one of my clients, I said, ask them what's in the IV. Guess what? They all got the same thing.
Right.
And each of that IV was $100 or whatever, 15 rotation. So they were making hand over fist, but the people were like, oh, I feel really great. But the thing is, in our practice, is if you go to a very prestigious doctor and they screw up, put you in a wheelchair, that blame comes back, unfortunately, to the practitioner who's not a medical doctor. And it's like, I become the scapegoat because it's my fault. I'm like, listen, he did it, okay, because he's not a medical doctor. They don't challenge them, they don't go after their medical license.
Right.
And
It's the same. It goes into that same thing you were talking about. You try to go get the system and it'll crush you.
oh, absolutely. I mean, because what I do is I have, if I find some medical malpractice, I have doctors and stuff that will go after them, you know. And I had one many years ago that ended up with uterine cancer. And when I did the research, I'm like, wait a second, your testosterone level was in the 300s. She was a female because of the pellets.
So normal range is what, 600 to
No,
1800 in a male?
that's for a
And
male.
yeah.
You know,
What's
anywhere
what's the
between
range for what's
400,
the range for a female?
20 to maybe 70. Is
Oh,
that
okay. So she was at 300?
300?
Okay.
Then another client I did, 4 weeks after the pellets, she was having problems. She had to go get them. I told her, I said, listen, your levels are unacceptable medically. She literally had to go have a friend dig them out,
Mm,
get the surgery out to get them out again. People don't understand that. And then they do this on a rotation basis. And these clinics, these anti-aging clinics are popping up all over the place.
right.
And if you go down to like Arizona, the naturopaths are laser, it's not even a naturopath. It's more like a spa.
Yeah.
They have laser this and they have skin graft here and this. And I'm like, because I went down there to see a very prestigious naturopath. I'm like, I feel like I'm walking into like a med spa rather than going
Right.
into like a naturopathic doctor.
Right. Right. So what are some other, and I'm loving this conversation because this is the thing that functional medicine is getting a bad reputation. And what I am wanting to do is I want to fill in that gap. I see many doctors of all kinds, but especially functional medicine and naturopathic doctors, um, treating the body without treating the mind. And when they say treating the mind, they may be doing it superficially. They may be doing some things that are superficial. Not to call any techniques bad, but I see a lot of that because here's the thing, I've been certified and all that. I've trained in EMDR and emotional freedom technique and things like that. And I see them helping, but I see them helping at surface level, where the person feels better for a while and something else emerges, or um, or they had minimum improvement, but the trigger's still there, even though the trigger's improved, and that trigger has the potential to, just like a coal in a smoldering fire, still has the potential to reignite and burn the forest down, right? Um, so what I'm wanting to do is give the doctors that are result driven. Yes, it's great to make money, but really result driven, not to have these assembly lines, not to have these spas and everything else, but result driven. I want to give them the missing piece of how to incorporate the mind into healing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a fantastic idea. And working with some of the practitioners myself, they open my eyes to how important that part of the equation is. And as you get more aware of it, you can actually sense it. It's like, hey, we got to shift gears here rather than kill Lyme or go after mold or,
Right,
or work on this gene expression. I'm like, we have to stop, recalibrate, and I need to refer you out to somebody who can help you deal with the trauma, whether it's um, using whatever technique there is, clearing it, motion code, whatever. But I feel that that is the major part of the equation because it's like what I should have done should have worked by now.
right,
And been to multiple doctors, been 6 to 8 weeks. We should have seen something, you know.
right,
And then you send them out to a practitioner, and they're like, yeah, it's like they had some deep stuff going on that they had no idea. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, did you know that their grandmother died on the table giving birth to their mother?
right.
You got
That's
the
the
transgenerational stuff going
mhm,
that functional medicine is not aware of,
right.
you
And
know?
and not only that, but just all the things that happen to children that get that again, either they're not getting screened for trauma or they don't know what to do for that trauma. Um, I recently had a case where I had a woman who was severely suicidal, and she had seen one of the best functional medicine doctors in North America for um, I think it was 3 years,
Mhm.
and he referred her to me, and within about a month to 5 weeks, and my work is about regression. I do really focused regression with uh, with a focus on the holographic imprint of memory. So we make sure that every fragment of that memory is transformed. So if memories are holographic, according to Carl Pribram, neuroscientist, and some of the stuff in Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe. Our entire universe is holographic, and
Mhm.
that's say. But if we don't get all the fragments behind that memory, that's where the trigger still lies for potential um, rejuvenating, revitalizing, coming back. And so I do regression work with batch releases and in big numbers. And within a month, she was a completely different woman, depression gone, able to leave the country, go on a vacation she had wanted her whole life, go to Ireland. And
Mhm.
I think that was a large part of helping change her mindset. What I'm looking for is if there's something still missing behind that, if there's something still missing behind that, Shawn, I would love to collaborate with you. And if I have people that need the appropriate screening, I would love to send them your way. That maybe look at detox pathways, maybe look at something more complicated, complex. I do have great results in having people change their mindset, but like you said, the world is getting more and more complicated all the time, and our environment's very toxic, you know. Um, what are some things that you see uh, other shortcomings you see in functional medicine? What are some other things that the overall practice, the overall, you know, collaboration of them should be aware of?
I mean, when you're dealing with functional medicine, uh, the functional medicine practitioners that I trained, they're like, why did I? They're like, everything that I once learned, I need to unlearn. And they spent like $80,000 on their FMD, functional medicine. And when I trained them within 6 weeks, they were actually having a much better response and using less supplementation. The thing that I see is unfortunately, when I started getting into it, it's all marketing. And what happens when you become a functional medicine practitioner is you get a higher rating on the Google search is one of the things. So with that being said, what's happening is that functional medicine is becoming more of a marketing ploy, in my opinion. It's like dangling the carrot. I agree with a lot of the philosophies they had, but one of the things that I would highly recommend in functional medicine is we need to look at changing the philosophies. We need to look at changing the order of what things done. And that's when I train and mentor practitioners. They're like, how are you different? I said, I'm functional medicine on steroids. I think they have a lot of good concepts, but a lot of functional medicine conferences I had to walk out of, specifically with the hormones, because some of the garbage that they were saying was appalling. And like, you
Like
got to be,
what?
well, like when you do testosterone replacement therapy, that you have to have certain things, certain levels, and um, how it, like may cause cardiovascular disease, which is a bunch of crap because, there was an article that was done back in, probably about 10 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, that where they were saying that testosterone replacement therapy increased cardiovascular risk and mortality. And the thing is the populace was over 65 veterans with PTSD.
Mm,
So that was actually retracted because Dr. Shippen, Eugene Shippen, who is an amazing um, pioneer in that field, stepped up and said, listen, this is garbage. Okay. That's why when you read clinical results, clinical labs, not clinical labs, but studies, you can't take everything at face value.
right.
And, half of the stuff out there is garbage. And that's where one of my things different is I started studying on rats because there's no political gain in rats, but the chemistries are very similar with their outcomes. And that's what I've seen throughout. And human studies are nice, but it's like there's political gain involved too.
For certain. For certain. And if
And
who can control what part, and if they can't, it's squelched.
well, it's more like, you know, the big thing is what about it being a peer review article? Okay. Well, peer review is when you look at it, it's I scratch your back, you scratch my back. That's what peer
Mm,
review is. Because a lot of times they'll ask their peers to review their articles, and in return, they'll do their article. I found that out multiple times too, because I saw two different. I'm like, wait a second, this is peer review. It's like the guy that wrote it is now peer reviewing peer reviewing it, on the same page. So I always tell people, said, take the studies with a grain of salt, do your own research, okay? Specifically when there's, multiple factors that have to be considered when they're only looking at one variable. Like
right.
estrogen
No,
doesn't.
and it's kind of been going that way. Her name was Maria, I believe, the editor of the I think it was a New England Journal of Medicine several years back.
Yep.
Came out and said that I take no pride in this, but you cannot use the journals as any kind of, authentic indication of where the science is pointing at anymore.
I,
So,
I remember that article,
right,
and it was I think it was about the validity. The word they said it was the validity of the.
right, right. And since then, it's probably just gotten worse. Um, so in your opinion, what are some things that people can do that are listening to this? Um, what are things people should do to start improving their health overall?
First of all, number one is you got to get your circadian pattern down. You've got
Start getting
to
what? Oh, your circadian pattern?
get your circadian pattern down. If you're staying late at night on the computer, if you're not wearing blue blocker glasses, if you're not getting 6 to 8 hours of restorative sleep, just because you sleep 6 to 8 hours doesn't mean it's restorative because your mind could be racing. This is why I often have my clients get the Aura ring because I want to see what their HRV is. If their HRV is in the upper 20s, low 20s, then that can become problematic in regards to the healing process. And one experiment was is one of my clients went to a practitioner. Her HRV was 20. They did a session, and next thing you'd know, the next day was 90, and that was
Mm,
from the trauma that they went through and got addressed. So right there was proof in the pudding when there was a consistently low. So measuring the HRV is one of the things that you can do at relatively very low price. The other thing is you might want to think about thinking about the detoxification. Detoxification can just be simply getting out into the sun because the sun stimulates your bile flow. It stimulates, think about it, babies that are born with jaundice, they put them under sun lamps because it breaks down the bilirubin. Okay.
right,
And just getting out into the sun stimulates your digestive juices. It stimulates, it increases your antidiuretic hormone, your MSH, your MS. Because I wrote an article for EMR Tech, how the sunlight, how red light therapy and sunlight therapy actually heals your gut and actually changes your gut microbiome versus taking the oral vitamin D itself.
right.
And that has been scientifically studied. Get out in the sun. Get out of the cloud. Get out of the. Also, if you're in a home, make sure your home is safe by changing the air filters. You know, maybe once every 2 months, depending. Sometimes my clients get the lower ones, the MERV eights, and they'll change them once every 3 weeks. And the problem is, if you get the higher MERVs, they're going to definitely make cleaner air, but they're going to burn through them faster and they're going to cost a lot of money. So if you get the MERV 8 or 9s, you can change them every 3, 4 weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, and be just as good.
I'm not familiar with those. You're talking about the air filters that go up into the
Talk
air
about the
conditioner,
HVAC.
right?
Talk about the HVACs.
Okay, okay.
The HVAC system.
Yeah, I just changed those in my house and the old ones needed change. But depending on the climate, I mean, I live in the Ozarks, Northeast Oklahoma, very corner of Northeast Oklahoma, and I live nearly off the grid on top of a mountain.
Mhm.
And it's foresty, but there's a lot of dust here, so I gotta change those at least once a month. I'm not
Mhm.
familiar with that brand. Are the one you're describing? Um, Let me just ask you this: are the ones you just get at Walmart, the basic air filters, okay for getting and changing, once a
Oh
month,
yeah,
once?
I mean, if they're like a good brand, there's there's the fillets, there's the filterettes they're called, there's but they all have a listing. So I always go with, if you're going to change them more often, go with the MERV 8s. Okay. The MERV 13s are the highest there are because the next ones up are the MERV 14s. And that's when you get into the hospital settings. And the
So
MERV
MERV, so it's MERV.
MERV 8s and change them once every 3 weeks. That's the more economical way to do it.
Okay,
And, if you have, because air quality is probably one of the top factors in a lot of chronic health issues.
right.
Especially if you have pets and dandruff and everything else going on in your location. The other thing that you can do is I use a lot of salt lamps in my clients because the salt lamps help with the negative ions and versus the positive ions. Um, it actually helps a lot of people calm down because of sometimes I'll have one by my computer. They're very, very cheap. You just plug them in and it neutralizes the positive ions coming off your computer. The
Right.
other thing you can do is Epsom salt baths. You can do Epsom salt baths with baking soda and vitamin C crystals. The vitamin C crystals, if you don't have filtered water, will knock out the chloramine and fluorine of the water. I have a lot of autistic kids that do Epsom salt baths and they complain about having negative responses. And the reason being is they're bathing in chlorinated water. So they're
Mm,
not getting fresh water. And as soon as you do the Epsom salt, it's going to open up the pores anyway. So all that toxins are going to come in. As soon as
oh,
you add, as soon as you add different type of water, or you make them do a foot bath in purified water, they normalize. And because what happens is a lot of people have lack sulfate because they're not out in the sun. Genetically, they're sulfate wasters, which most autistic kids are. They're sulfate wasters. So that's going to lead into potential issues with bile flow because you need sulfate in order to sulfonate a lot of your hormones. You need sulfate in order to create glutathione. So you end up with glutathione deficiency. So a lot of times providing the substrates with sulfate actually leads into glutathione. But if you eat a lot of sulfur-based foods and you have genetic gene expressions to where you can't convert that sulfur or that sulfur into sulfate, that becomes problematic. And we often see that a lot of times with people that have overgrowth, specifically the hydrogen sulfide overgrowth. Because what happens is the hydrogen sulfide, quote, is a pathogen, but really it's an adaptive response. The body is trying to adapt to what being thrown at it because whatever was thrown at it was not in its original blueprint. So the body's trying to do what it's supposed to do as a result. And this is why we're getting into the autoimmune disorders. Because what happens is the body's doing it because the body says I need glutathione. So what happens is it's going to raise up the hydrogen sulfide, which is gets converted into sulfite, and then the sulfite gets converted into sulfate. Well, when you have glyphosates and mold and different types of mycotoxins and alcohol, that process gets or genetics gets impaired because and the glyphosates because it causes a molybdenum deficiency. Molybdenum, B1, and
so
iodine,
thiamine.
thiamine. Yeah, it's to convert that you need selenium, you need iodine, and you also need B1 and molybdenum in order to get the proper conversion going. And with the thiamine, a lot of people are deficient because of the quote alcohol. The problem is a lot of people since COVID have become alcoholics, but alcoholics based upon the fact of drinking, they become the bar itself because of the
Mm,
biochemistry that is associated with that non-alcoholic fatty liver. And because they have candida and mold and all these other malfunctions going on, their body starts producing high levels of ethanol alcohol, acetaldehydes as a result. And I even have cases to where people are blowing um, legal blood limits that are intoxicated. I'm actually dealing with one right now. She got arrested for a DUI. She hasn't drank in 10 years. And that's because of her body chemistry reflecting that of an alcoholic.
yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done. Um, One of the things you want to do is you want to just take 5 or 10 minutes and just go for a walk. Go out in nature. Go out, get your hands dirty. I mean, for crying out loud, we used to roll around in pig crap, you know, you know, or jump in the sandbox with the cockroaches when we were
Right.
younger. We were always in the sandboxes. You don't see anybody out there now. We used to go around on the baseball fields. What was one of the things that we used to do with the dust? We used to scuffle, we used to run around the bases and scuff our feet, right?
Yeah.
Create dust.
It's a great way to restore the microbiome in ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. People don't understand that the
Right.
microbiome exists out in nature by just going out into the nature, going out into the woods. There's a natural microbiome right there itself that we don't always
I
realize.
always thought if you're pulling weeds out and you pull a weed out like out of your garden and you see it pull out and you see that little plume explode, that right
Mhm.
there is like so essential for sinuses and everything.
Oh, absolutely. What were they called? Not rag. Was it ragweed? Something like that.
Say that again.
What were the flowers that used to poof? Oh, the dandelions. The
Right.
the ones that had the whites on them. They
Yep.
would pop up. And then you go running through the weeds and you
Hmm.
see all the pollen go through, you know. We used to do that as kids all the time. Go play out in the cornfield. Don't see that, We used to play war all the time, you know. Come home
Oh
with
yeah.
come home loaded with ticks on us.
Hmm.
And we wouldn't think anything about it. We just pull them off. Now we know.
That's how that's how it is here where I live. I gotta get some chickens out here, but in the spring, this since I've lived here about 2 years now, and every spring I have my own shooting range, and I go out, drive a Polaris out there, and I mess around the targets a little bit, and I'll come back, my son and I'll come back, and I'll have more tick bites than I've had my whole life in just a matter of a weekend, and I don't freak out about them. I take them off.
Mhm,
I might take a little bit of grapefruit seed extract,
mhm.
GSC, and maybe some something from called it's called cruciferous complete from standard process to kind of open my detox pathways a bit more.
Yep.
Just have a sterilize my blood if need be, but I think with the right mindset of just life preserving, being in a great mindset of gratitude every day and just loving life, that gives us a tremendous stability versus those kind of things. Would you agree?
Yeah, what you're talking about is a lot of my clients get the psychosomatic responses going. I know that they have issues, but because of specific functional medicine doctors telling you have to go live in a hut
Mm,
or out into a tent, and I told around and said, "You go tell the doctor," said, how about you go live out in the tent like a dog and see what it's like, you know?
right,
And you're setting, in the car, because what you're doing is you're programming them.
for certain. I mean, I hate to say it, but I have a number of clients that are programmed to think that they have to take the supplements or they'll get sick. And when we're sitting down, we're getting real, we're talking, they like, I don't want to take these. I just don't want to take them. And it's like they just don't even match. They don't even feel that that's the right approach, but they've been said, hey, if you don't take these, you're going to get sick. And oftentimes what I find is it's trauma, it's underlying trauma that's really that their cells are eavesdropping on from early experiences, boundary violations, occurrences in the womb, all kinds of things. And again, it's escaped the radar, and that's what I do. My work is purely psychosomatic, mind body, and I will barely do any lab tests anymore. I barely recommend supplements because usually they have already tried everything, and the last thing I want to do is give them something else additionally, a recommendation. I usually go in and just help them shift their mindsets. I look at personalities that are responsible for illness, can't say no when they should, things like that, and
Absolutely.
and shift those kind of things. And that's where the I want to touch on this because you brought it up first. Spiritual connection, spiritual connection, vital. What is spiritual connection in your opinion? What do you mean by that?
Number one everybody has their own belief. And I related to my clients that said one of the first things they teach you in Alcohol Anonymous is a belief in a higher power is going to increase, but they don't identify what that higher power is. And I always go back to the old cartoon, the old what's happening. show where Rerun was worshiping a head of lettuce, Ralph. And what I try to do is I don't care what you got to do. I'm not going to hold that against you. Okay. I'm non-judgmental when it comes to that type of stuff. But whatever your belief system is you can always refer back to it. Okay. And spirituality is personal. It's your personal connection with whatever it is, whether it's earth, God, or just people say the universe, whether that means multiple deities, single deities, that's not me to judge. And I worked one of the trainings I actually worked on was up in the Amish country. So you also have to work in regards to the ethnic diversities. So, like they have it's like their own little world outside of ours. But when it comes to spirituality, um, I think it begins with becoming not so much out there, but rather it begins inside here. And there's a running joke where you know, um, people are looking for God, whether he's up in the clouds, over there. Universe is everywhere, but it also is inside of us. And there's different avenues inside of us that have not even been tapped yet. And when you start not experimenting, but utilization of plant medicine, when you start utilizing, ketamine, when you start using ayahuasca, bufu, that spirituality transcends to more your inner self. So it's nice to know that the universe is outside, but there's also an unexplained universe inside of us that we need to explore, that we need to understand more.
And that really segues, ties right into quantum physics, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Because that's really and that's again where my target is what I do with people, even through Zoom. I work 100% through Zoom, and I'm able to help them just the same way as an ayahuasca or something else. Get them out of their way, take them back before they were ever touched by the contamination of humanity, whatever it is. Usually it's 0 to 5. That's where about 99% of my clients end up between conception and 5,
Mhm.
oftentimes in the womb. And then we go before that event ever took place and install something else better. And and when that happens, um, their whole it we leverage how they feel about themselves suddenly. And that's where things really start to that's been the most powerful thing I've witnessed with that. And really it connects us back to that divine self, whatever that might be. I've studied about 300 near-death experiences in my life and interviewed people, and they all have some kind of correlation of bliss, harmony, zero burden, absolutely zero burden. And if that's where we, if that's where what I would say is pure consciousness, if that's where we go when we leave the physical body for a moment, if that's what these people have shared, that's what we start out as. And
Mhm.
that's all we know until until even after conception, until we have that first taste of humanity. And if we can get back to that and put something else there first, then oftentimes the bumps we face in life, we don't judge ourselves so harsh against.
And you bring up a good point too, is like a lot of I have encountered with very unique people with a very unique gift. And one of the ones that they tell us is Shawn, if you think about it, it's like you used to talk to your stuffed animals and stuff. And the problem or you used to see things that weren't there. But because we're told that does not exist, that's almost like auto programming, that it's shutting us off from that part of our brain. And then what happens is we have the ability to communicate with animals, but we've been so conditioned to say that doesn't exist.
Right.
And having a near life experience myself, I the easiest way I can explain it is it's like you're in this bubble of amazing love and bliss is the word to say, like euphoria, nirvana.
This is so you've had that yourself. Is this you've describing it yourself from your own experience then?
Yeah, I felt
Okay.
I was trying to grab a boat. I fell into the water and I was, sucked back in and the voice says I remember the exact words is your work is not done yet.
Mm,
And that's when got sucked back in my body. But I didn't see a lot of the tunnels and things that people
okay.
talk about. It was just more of a sense of serenity. And after that experience, being 4 years old and looking up at the sky to your mom saying, Mom, I don't belong here. And that's exactly how I felt all my life. I don't, and that's, I'm starting to see what we call people that are awoke. It's almost like we don't belong in this dimension. It's
Right.
like we don't feel like we're part of this reality. It's
Right.
almost like an altered state of mind, almost like a matrix that has been manifested over a course of, you know, years. And it's almost like we're living in our own made up world that has been pre-programmed for us. And the people that who am I speak who are woke, that's what they also feel.
Right.
It's
But our
almost like,
soul, but our soul came here for a reason, though.
yes,
You
we're
know,
here for a reason, but intuitively we know that this isn't the place we need to be belong.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
I keep telling, even being 4 years old and saying, Mom, I don't belong here. And I have, you know, let's just say I have had certain things happen that are on an ongoing basis biologically to my son. I have been visited. One night he one night he came up, he said, Shawn, he goes, Daddy, Daddy. He goes, the cow people were here. I'm like, cow people. And he described the grays.
He described the what?
He described the
Oh,
grays.
the grace. Okay.
He
Right.
described them.
Right.
And for him to describe what he described, a 4 year old would never know about that.
Yeah.
Being frozen. I said, what happened? He said, Daddy, they they put I was frozen. The words he that resonated with me and scared the living bejesus out of me is I was frozen like a popsicle.
Mm,
And I said, what happened? Well, I was frozen like a popsicle. They took the bed to the cow house. I said, did they hurt you? He goes, yes, they did. And I was frozen like a popsicle. He kept saying frozen like a popsicle. That means that they paralyzed, that he was frozen.
right.
And that's something that a 4 year old won't see on TV or understand. And he talked about the lights, bright lights, and he came up and I showed him multiple pictures and he pointed out that it was the grays. And I have to, remind him that, they're just checking in on you, whatever their intentions were. But I do know that this has been a common phenomenon with practitioners I talk to themselves who are autistic. And when I start talking about it, they open up about it.
Right.
It's something about the chemistry that has been repetitive in that avenue. And I don't know what it is, but I do believe that we are being studied.
I mean,
There's no doubt. And I think my intuition, I was always joking about, I'm like, listen, it's either, the world's going to end or little green men are going to jump down, little green men are going to jump. are going to land on the White House lawn. You know,
They're likely already there.
I think what I think they're doing is I think they're prepping us. I think they're prepping us for the actual contact, probably within the next several years.
Right. I mean, they've talked about Space Force. Uh, one of my proxy mentors, and I mean, I've met him and I've talked with him a couple times. Greg Braden. You familiar with
Mhm,
Greg Braden?
mhm.
So, um, he did a presentation once talking about our origins. It was just really fascinating about that same thing. And there's a good chance that these, you know, whether they're aliens or not, just higher intelligent beings that are perhaps millions of light years ahead of us in
Right,
evolution, and they
right.
have and they have
That's exactly.
they have
They're their future version of us.
right. And there was what I understand is there was a time when in their timeline the option came to merge with technology or stay, who they were. And we're kind of on that cusp now when you look at things like, Elon Musk and the neuro chip and things and these
The
intelligent.
most I have contact who is off grid and who is the most sound person you would know. And he said, Shawn, he goes, what they showed you in Dark Skies and Arrival, he goes, I can't believe they showed you because that is actually almost like government secrets.
So it's a way of prepping, isn't it? It's a way of letting you kind of, see behind the scenes and let your mind kind of get accustomed to that. So whenever it does, I mean, here's the thing, like this, the CIA has within the last few years undisclosed, well, several things. I actually have the research here on, oh yeah, basically we're a big hologram and
Mhm.
basically consciousness creates. So they
It,
disclosed these things. And then they also said that, oh yeah, they don't even call them UFOs. They call them, uh, eh, on something aerial phenomenon, EEP, or, something
EPA,
like that,
yeah,
you
EPA.
know, EPAs, yeah, some kind of phenomenon, right?
Yep.
And they're out there. The Joe Rogan podcast, he brings people that are credentialed military people, and
Oh yeah.
they say, "Oh yeah, we see that all the time. They're following our jets all the time," and it's like nobody cares. It's like nobody's really not. I don't want to say nobody cares, but we're stuck to something like ball games or something else on the TV rather than um, really really paying attention to uh, bigger things going
Well,
on.
you're talking about using diversion techniques.
Right.
You know, oh, we're so focused on like P. Diddy, for example, when on the backside there was somebody that was talking about doing like um, some type of marking um, for like bringing things to I don't say one world order, but trying to universalize everything by doing certain techniques. We see that a lot. It's like while watching DP Diddy, meanwhile, on the back door, this is going on, you know?
Right.
So they
Right.
use a lot of diversion techniques from Hollywood, and they do use a lot of social media as a diversion. I mean, for God's sake, go on your Facebook, okay? North Carolina is a war zone, but you're seeing more P. Diddy than you are of North Carolina. And then little do they know that they're actually taking the U.S. Guard to another country and not utilizing them here. They were
Mm.
shipped off to some Middle East country now versus going to where
Okay.
we're supposed to go.
So that's why the memes of uh put US first and all these other it's funny how the world has transferred so much. You get ideas of what's going on through memes than you do anything on the news, right?
Well, the running joke is about the how Godzilla's come, manifest. It was like this, then this, and then it's like the memes like, yeah, Godzilla's going to come out of the ocean, you know, because of the manifestation of Hollywood. And that's what the meme was getting at was it was this, and next thing you know, Godzilla's going to be riding.
Oh
You know,
yeah, Hollywood. Do you know when you look at wizards throughout wizards and you look at Harry Potter and you think things like that and they have that wand, they're
hmm?
carrying that wand. Do you know what that wand is actually made of?
Mm-mm.
Wood from the Hollywood tree
Huh.
because it's great at casting spells.
Oh wow.
So their wands themselves are made of that little wooden stick that comes from a Hollywood tree. So it is definitely these tactics. I've looked into some of that, some of the things just to be aware because if you're not aware of it, it's gonna if you're not aware of what's influencing you, and we all are to some extent, but it's a good idea to be aware of how they use neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotic principles, hypnotic anchors
Absolutely.
on everything to make people feel certain ways, especially fear, play off of that, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, what they do is it's a fear of unbeing sa it's a fear of not being safe. Once you
exactly.
once you once you accept that in the subconscious mind, you're done. Because they tried religion, that failed. They tried different things, but now they know what makes us tick is our fears and installing that into our subconscious mind about fear. And once you accept that, it's kind of like cancer, man. It's like once you accept cancer, you're done. You're 1 foot in the grave and you're done. But people that fight it, because one of the techniques from NLP we talked, and it actually works, is we did visualization of blowing bubbles. You visualize the cancer coming in and going out. And by doing so, what you're doing is you're giving your body permission to release it.
Right,
And it works off the visualization. Because in NLP, one of the greatest things they taught us was it's called slaying the dragon. You become the knight
right,
and you
right.
actually create the artistic um, code, and then you go kill the dragon. And what NLP is you always, the director, and then you visualize how
Right.
far you go up. You're the actor, you control the trauma, you stop it, and then like you visualize somebody doing something bad to them, you beat them up and throw them in the trash can or something to take them out.
Yep. A lot of a
And-
lot of a lot of therapy and just what you're describing there because the mind, the body is it's a metaphorical manifesting machine. So if you can create it metaphorically as a symbolistic, with slaying the dragon and whatnot, and get it involved and oftentimes you might need some kind of justice. You might need some kind of revenge. You might need some kind of venting of some sort of,
Mhm.
especially, whenever you look at cancer, there's usually in the
Trauma.
most common things I see, the most common things I see in cancer are there was a time between 0 to 5 when the most common one. There's a lot. There's everyone's so unique, but one of the most common themes that I continue to see is we regress to cause and we find a time in the womb when the mom and dad were talking about abortion, when they were talking about, this was a mistake. This pregnancy was a mistake. And at conception till around 3 is when we absolutely learn the most. We learn the most about ourselves. But yeah, it can be, right now I'm working with a woman and it all comes down to they love my brother more. They love him more. The brother was tend to be, at least from the perceptions of the little girl, had the brother had higher marks in the mom and dad's eyes. They admired him more. They did more. When she made a mistake and spilled ink at one point on one of his shirts, and he had to wear
Mhm.
that, and it was just complete like. Went to physical hitting her and things because she destroyed his shirt. And that to a little girl. uh, of he loves me more, or the parents love him more, um, creates a personality where the first thing I asked her was, at your work, I showed her a list of personalities that create illness, and it's an obligation to duty that overrides everything else, an obligation to a role, like specific, I have to do this no matter what. And she goes, I said, do you see yourself on any of these? Because they always match personalities of illness. And she said, oh my gosh, every one of those. And it was a strict obligation to do a duty, and the role becomes greater than she is, to where she's always staying up late. She's always working on the weekends, always volunteering, always doing this, getting rewards and getting, socially pats on the back for being such a hard worker. And that is, again, a nourishing issue. Okay. Breast cancer. And it has to do with, where did she learn this? Early on, she got the hint that she wasn't good enough. She wasn't as good as her brother. So her subconscious, those primal drives weren't met. They only grow stronger. And now it comes to the boy where it comes to boil to the top, reaches critical mass to where I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this to try to fulfill that need. I
And
have to
it's
prove that I'm cared for, you know?
and that's a similar scenario to my father and my mother, because my mother was a very loving mother, but my father was very submissive. And as a result of being submissive, he was didn't want to engage, and he always bow down to her is the word, because he didn't
Right.
want confrontation. And that exists still to the day, to where I'm not, it's not a, it's almost like a primal programming to be submissive,
Mm,
even though certain scenarios you shouldn't be, but you feel like you're obligated to do that
right.
because that's what you saw your father do, because your father never questioned your mother.
Right.
He never questioned his wife. And as a result, that becomes primarily programmed within the child to see that.
Yep.
And then if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you're going to expect punishment.
Right. And
And
those come into, and those eventually evolve into personalities that create illness, personalities that, they they're such driven to try to satisfy those needs that the driving force behind it creates tension and stress in the body, that those oftentimes become the the underlying root in a lot of chronic illness. And that's my thing is I would say this, uh, seven, maybe 8 out of 10 doctor visits have to do with some kind of memories, some kind of perception they learned when they were young, running on an endless loop, making them have these coping mechanisms that were not necessary for survival times in childhood, but become coping mechanisms in adults. So,
because, as a child and stuff, I was harassed by children with balloons. So I went into fight, flight, or freeze. And still to this day, when I get over anxious, I go into what I call locked up syndrome, to where I can't speak, I freeze, and it becomes hard to communicate. And then as a result, that causes tension because you want to say something, but then you're fearful what you say has consequences and results. So that's why you're better off not saying anything at all.
right,
And that becomes problematic when you're trying to communicate with people, whether it be loved ones or friends or whatever. And that's what I also do is people would yell at me and I'd go into fight, flight, or freeze
right,
because that was my survival mechanism. Because as a child, I had nothing else to do other than just curl up and take the punishment of the balloons popping next to my head, you know, or screaming at the top. That's why I have problems with children crying, because it causes physical pain. And that's and that physical pain, it's not the act of the child crying, it's the idea of it gets to a certain decibel. It's a
right.
frequency.
And that I think what it does is it acts that when you hit that, it triggers some kind of holographic imprint within you, and that goes active. I think that's what PTSD is, where your body captures something, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in the body, it can be in the field, captures a moment, keeps it in a pocket of consciousness, and your conscious mind doesn't know it's over. I'm sorry, your subconscious mind doesn't know it's over. Your conscious mind does, but all it takes is a specific external stimuli or an internal, just random thought to activate one fragment of that. It goes active, and we have the physical symptoms come back or physical pain, even though your conscious mind is not even aware. It's focused on the current event, but your subconscious mind um, goes right back to that same state. That's like the body keeps the score, saying, so
Yeah, and the way I explain PTSD is like it's a Trojan. And what happens is it keeps replicating and replicating and replicating until it comes to that breaking point.
right,
And what when one of the things is I explained to him, said, if you can find somebody to ghostwrite it, insert that file prior before, that sounds like the work that you do, is you go in before, but ayahuasca does the same thing, but you can do the same thing ayahuasca does.
right,
Ayahuasca does transgenerational regression is what it does.
right,
It puts you back to the point, space, and time to where your DNA, it reprograms your DNA.
right.
Because it's almost like I would say a time travel or transdimensional, but that's what it does is it takes you back before that episode of event, and it reprograms you to
That's
move
that's
on.
exactly yeah, that's exactly right. And we know through epigenetics that uh that's actually accurate, what we can actually do with that. And that's it. Basically, what I do is anchor people in safety. I worked with a guy yesterday that had the thing he wanted to work on was just fear, fear of this, fear of that, fear of the election, fear of gas prices. And whenever we brought up that fear, his elbow started to hurt really bad. And so I anchored him into safety, had him all blissed out his subconscious using some hypnosis techniques, put him in safety. And then we regress in there and we go. And he was suddenly a 26-year-old person who was in battle, had nothing to do with him. And some arrow got shot into his arm. And that was the fear. He had to keep fighting and his arm didn't work anymore. And it had nothing to do with it. Maybe did, I don't know. It could have been an ancestor or it could have been a morphic resonant field where his body when memory gets recorded, it goes into nature more or less, and it could have been something similar in a resonant frequency to him, to that event.
It was
And
it's interesting you bring that up because I always keep there's a in my own health journey, the first thing that I got whacked on was the first thing I noticed was the bottom of my feet were sore. And it felt like I had burning feet syndrome. And I still, to this day, when I hit a certain point in regards to emotional stress, the first thing I know is the brain fog, the feet, and the gut distress. And it's almost like a chain event. It's like when one goes, they all go. And as time goes up, it starts to build. But number one thing I feel is when certain events are in safety mode, my bottom of my feet don't hurt. As soon
yeah,
as my bottom of my feet starting to hurt, I know I'm going into that bad place.
and you know what that sounds like to me, Sean, is definitely a memory going active as a holographic imprint. The same thing happens if memories are stored through holographically in our body, and when that fragment goes active, the pain returns, even if the limb is missing. Phantom limb pain. That's why a person can have an arm hurt when the limb is no longer there, or an organ. How many
Imprinting.
times? Right. And it's holographic. A fragment of it goes active and the pain returns, even though physically it's no longer there.
That's why amputees tend to have pain in their fingers, even though their arm's gone.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the same concept. And I would say that that's likely what's going on when a fragment's something got active, feet pain go, and oh, okay, now there's going to be a cascade of other events because they're likely related, you know.
Yeah, and that's usually got to do with the volume of the kids is probably the main one.
Mm,
And it's not. It used to be. I thought it was mold. I think it's more of I think it's more of an emotional, like I said, a holographic
right.
that gets triggered. or a you don't fulfill a certain requirement or a certain duty as a response.
Right.
So it's probably like you said, it's probably an emotional holographic. Um,
In my book here, Sean, not to change the subject, but I have this book here that just I released last year. It's been great. I'm on my new one. It's called From Pain to Purpose, and it has in the back of it really easy techniques to go in there, activate that, and clear it out. If you would, if it's something you're interested in seeing if you can do some inside work on that. Um, I can send you the link if you buy it through Amazon. I can also make sure you get some free videos with it that'll kind of talk you how to do the techniques so you're not just reading it. But I think you would I think you'd be able to access that stuff and change that if it was something you'd want to do.
yeah, because when I have this, when I am in the mode of safety, it's like I'm unstoppable. When I get out of that mode of safety, my adrenals, because all being autistic, it's also the fear of change.
Right,
And that's just how autism really is. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the change. You know, but the old Sean would be like, all right, what are we going to do next? Now it's like, since I got older, it's like these memories and with the extra stress of having twins, you can't focus as much. You always are in a state of fear when they should be therapeutic.
right,
So there's something that is um, creating that holograph to where the children should be more of a enjoyment and not be you know, a subconscious fear.
right.
Or maybe it's the idea of the sound. And I kept telling people, it's like, if I could get the sound sensitivity under control, everything else would be fine. Because it's like,
That
to
brings
me,
it back.
that's the trigger.
Right,
As soon as I hit that, as soon as they start, it's not what they're doing, you know,
right.
it's the sound. Once the sound hits a certain frequency, it's like I want to put my fist through a wall,
Yeah,
because you get that physical pain. It's almost like somebody slapping you over the side of the head with a two by four, holding you down
yeah.
because you can't do anything about it, but you have to suck it up in
I
order.
would I would almost guarantee that's what's going on. There's no guarantees when it comes to anything, but what you're describing, it sounds exactly like a holographic imprint going active. And when that goes active, your conscious mind is quickly siphoned out. Now you're sucked into the content of what your body's doing, and it can make you um, hit 0 to 60 real quick, you know. And when you can access that fragment, all you need to do is access one fragment to change the whole thing, which is the advantage of holographic therapy. So, and this is here's the thing. What I do, I've studied all those things, and this is completely different. It has some concepts of NLP, but it's completely different. And oftentimes, when people do this work, they say there's no equal. I don't know about that. I'm always got my ear to the ground. I'm always studying. I'm always learning and listening. And I brought you on here today because, in my opinion, you're a brilliant practitioner, and I just want to learn as much as I can from people that are like-minded that are getting outstanding results. Because, like myself, it seems you're driven for results, and those are the people I want to connect with. So I tell you what, Sean, I've got a client in about 5 minutes. I could just keep going on and on with you for hours, though. I would definitely love to reconnect with you and do this again. But in our remaining time, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to
The
get a hold of you?
best way to get hold of me is through my email address. It's matrixhealthwell@gmail.com.
Okay. matrixhealthwell@gmail.com.
That's correct.
And you're based out of Matrix Health and Wellness in Pennsylvania, correct?
Actually, in Michigan, but I
In
do,
Michigan. Okay.
yeah, we're in Michigan right now. So we do mostly telecom, Zoom calls.
Okay.
100% online.
It makes it convenient. I love doing that. So
I do too.
in Michigan, well, Shawn, you make sure you bundle up.
It's getting ready. It's, winters are rough out here. It's true.
Right, right. Well, Shawn, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've looked forward for some time, and I would love to reconnect with you and continue to go down this rabbit hole, talking about things that are all unorthodox, talking about the, um, you know, what we are, what's our purpose here, really what's going on behind the scenes, and what we can do to get people connected back with that divine spark within them, because that's the real answer. That's the
It is.
real answer, you know.